But I think having talked about the book actually gives us a good perspective, because if people don't understand your background and who you are, Mark, they're not going to understand the perspective that you have when it comes to college football. And when it comes to a school like Indiana, like we like to joke here that we call it the BC era, the before Cignetti. But it's like the school or the program Indiana was pre-Cignetti and post-Cignetti is stark. So I just kind of want to start with you as the historian, like pre-2020, like November 2023. Were you even looking at Indiana football?
Well, only because I look at all football. So yeah, I'm one of the weirdos. But yeah, people weren't watching Indiana football. It's funny because I have some guilty, I guess I'll call them, or strange rooting interests. Truth be known, everyone, I'm an Ohio State fan, and it actually gets in the way. I don't like it for what I do. I truly don't. People laugh when I follow that up. I've been saying that recently for the first time, but I've thought it for a long time. I don't like being an Ohio State fan doing what I'm doing, because they're in the middle of everything. They're just always in every discussion about elite or who should be number one, or, and I wish they were just, Kansas State, and I'm rooting for Kansas State, and so they never come up. So we can leave them alone, and I can be objective, and I can be viewed as objective, just talking about the teams involved in championship results. But I got kind of this guilty pleasure growing up. Huge college football fan, coast to coast, loved all the conferences, but I grew up in Ohio. And it's funny when people start talking about conference pride, and some people are into it. Other people are like, why do you root for your teams in your conference? That's stupid. Now, I can't explain it, and I don't think there's a right or wrong. People can do whatever they want. I'm not telling them what to do, but I didn't have anyone. I didn't grow up in a sports family. I just did this I just found this on my own. And I'm like 9 years old, and I'm rooting for the Big Ten in bowl games. Like nobody told me to do that, or that's what you were supposed to. I just naturally rooted for the Big Ten in bowl games. And it mattered that, Michigan State lost this bowl game to, somebody in the ACC, and I get upset. It made no sense. I'm like, watching the Liberty Bowl with this, Big Ten pride that, that we've, we're 5-4. We can't lose this game to drop to 5-5 in bowl play, that kind of stuff. So Indiana's part of that. And I think even though Indiana then with the move to division play was in the East, the vaunted East, I always had this soft spot for Big Ten Western Division teams like Purdue and Minnesota, the teams that you'd see play on ESPN2 at noon every week. Yeah. The Minnesota Purdue game, the Northwestern
the
Illinois
Purdue
game.
Northwestern game with Beth Mullins.
Yes. And you could
annual tradition.
You could kind of throw Indiana into that mix with those teams as well. And I just thought it was cool watching, a 3-6 team taking on a 4-5 team in the middle or bottom tier of the Big Ten. I was always interested in those teams and those games. So Indiana was part of that too.
So I guess contrast that to you're watching 3-6 Indiana try their best in 4 OTs against Akron, to the attitude and the confidence and the swag that Curt Cignetti brought to this program. I guess the question would be, do you feel like you were late to the party? Do you feel like you gave yourself enough time to understand if it was real? Are you still skeptical? Like, how does Curt Cignetti's Indiana football appear to somebody from the outside, outside of the Indiana fan base?
I guess to an Ohio State fan is kind of, I want to hear about that too. A national perspective, and also as an Ohio State fan.
Yeah. So everybody let Alex's first sentence sink in, that if Akron makes a field goal, didn't they miss they missed a field goal going in overtime, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
That if Akron makes we're talking about one of the 2 or 3 worst programs in the country is beating a Big Ten team on the road. It wasn't
good.
Bad.
Yep. Oh,
yeah. And so here Indiana is as a legitimate program. So the first thing Cignetti did was obviously took everybody by storm by making headlines and causing people to click, because he's trashing Purdue And then he throws in Ohio State and Michigan in there. And I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. What's this guy do? He has no right to do this, but
we were saying that too in a way, you know.
Well, yeah, I was saying it, but not in a like I'm mad way. I was like admiring it. I was like, that's cool. I like that. This is probably what Indiana needs. And what's the worst that can happen? The worst would be just Indiana continues to be Indiana and he gets laughed out of town in 3 or 4 years, but nobody really notices too much because he goes 4-8 3 times and gets fired. And that's, he's got the Tom Allen, even though we could go into Tom Allen, obviously 2019 and 20 have been really good teams, but, and he moves on. But that's what I think Indiana needed, from a psyche standpoint, somebody who would say, no, we're not going to put up with it. I'm going to instill some swag, some confidence. What we will never know. Maybe you guys could shed some light on this because, I'm sure Curt Cignetti, as a coach and just a personality better than I do because you follow him all the time and I just pick up on stuff here and there. But I think he was that guy anyway, but I got to think that if he would have taken over at fill in the blank, Tennessee or somewhere, that he's not quite the same guy. He was himself and still is, but also he knows what he's doing. And he knows this program needs this. They're beaten down. They need a leader. They need somebody that's going to galvanize everyone, put them on the map in the off season. And again, I admired it. And then, of course, he backed it up, which is amazing.
Yeah. I think it's like it goes both ways. Like obviously Indiana needed Cignetti, but I think in a way Cignetti needed to go to a place like Indiana when he was going to make his Power 4 jump, because obviously with his resume, it was only a matter of time before he got a Power 4 job. But just like where is it going to be? I don't think he is the same guy at Tennessee or Florida, which are West Virginia, which are schools that kind of, I guess West Virginia is kind of a different story, but I think it's kind of the perfect fix. He's a guy that wants to build. He's a guy that went from top recruiter at Bama on a Saban staff, recruiting Mark Ingram, Julio Jones, and Dante Hightower, to taking a D3 head coaching job. Not a lot of guys do that. So to take that risk on himself and go somewhere where he can kind of make something his own, I think is something that he, desires. And when all the hoopla was going around that he's going to be taking the Florida job during last season, I think we were laughing that off because I think we knew that Cignetti, wanted a job like Indiana to really, he's kind of he's an arrogant guy. I think he's a guy that wants a statue at a school. I think he's confident in himself that he can accomplish it. Right. So I think it kind of goes both ways.
Well, that too. And to your point of like almost playing a character, this is something Cignetti has acknowledged in interviews where he's like, he showed up and it felt like the fan base was on life support. So I was like, how do I inject any sort of excitement and confidence into it? Not that he's not a hyper confident, very competitive person. He is, like, very much so. But I think part of what he said at the basketball game and a lot of like the more brazen quotes he had at like media day and things like that, a lot of that was purposeful. I don't think if he walks into a program where like a Tennessee, like a Florida, where it's like you kind of just need somebody to drive the car, like you don't have to do much of that rawness to fire up the fan base. You just have to go out there and perform. Versus like Indiana football is like you kind of had to like remind people they existed.
Yeah, the fans needed a little spark, especially coming off a season where they go 4 overtimes against Akron, coming off, where there even was a point in time, like you mentioned, 19 and 20, like those were our junior and senior years in college. Like I look back history wise, and our 4 years, we didn't make a single tournament. We're known as a basketball school. Look at that 4-year period when we were in school. That's actually the best 4-year period historically in Indiana football history between 2017 and 2020. Having those, the 8-5 year, and then a year where they're basically ranked top 10 the entire year and kind of, get a little snubbed by Ohio State in the Big Ten title game conversation for another time. But
it was brought up just the other day. Somebody brought it up.
And then they had that letdown, right? And then it's just like, man, are we ever going to be good? Like they had a little taste of it, right? And I think there's something to Tom Allen walked so Cignetti can run. I think all they needed was a little that spark to come back. And I think because that 2020 year, I mean, it was pretty much it was a football town for a little bit there. We were beating Penn State, we were beating Michigan, and we got a little taste of what could be. And all we needed was a little spark, and Sig brought it. Galvanization, as Jay Wizzle's saying in the chat.
Mark, you said somebody brought that up on the show the other day.
I'm sure you guys were Tom Allen fans at the time.
Mm-hmm. It's tough to see him go.
Yeah, he was fun to watch in a different way than Cignetti.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was a character too. Any guy that's going to do laps around the stadium and be jumping up, high-fiving guys and head-butting players that have helmets.
He gave himself a black eye.
Yes, just nuts. The intensity is just to be marveled. It's crazy. Yeah. But Cignetti is funny because when I watch him, I don't know if you guys get the same response. I don't have any investment in what he's saying, so it's just entertainment. But he's kind of he can be I don't like throwing around this word in this day and age because people take it the wrong way. But he's like got a little bully in him, and
for sure,
little
absolutely,
yeah. But he's also sometimes he seems a little awkward, but not in an awkward way, in a way that people are awkward, like they're afraid or timid or shy. No, he's just that's like it's out there. This is who I am, and it's quirky, it's strange, he's all over the place. It's just fun to watch. I've never not been entertained by anything that this guy has said. Just even the quote. Little halftime, coach's interview before they hit the locker room where, on the other end of the spectrum, Jim Tressel's going to tell you when Ohio State was up 41-0 at halftime, we're in a tough Big Ten game. We've got all the respect in the world for Northwestern. And it was, he's buttoned up. Cignetti's in 15 seconds, he's going to say something that's going to just be strange or condescending or something that's going to be funny.
Yeah. Usually about his own team. Usually he'll be like, I was really pissed about a third down conversions. They're like up by 5 touchdowns. He's like upset that they didn't convert that 1 third down 2 possessions ago. Like he has these, it's very obvious he's a football psychopath. And that's kind of where those nervous tics come in. Not so much, like you said, not like a unconfident nervousness, but just like, I only care about football. I'm always talking about football. So I might come off a little weird because I'm thinking about so many things all the time. Keys, you frozen?
I believe so.
Oh, it might be frozen. Oh, wow. All right, I'm going to put it to the chat then. I'm going to drive the bus for a little bit. So, Mark, SoCal Hot Sauce, they're giving you a little shout out. Great positive reviews on the book. They're asking which year in the 90s was the most suspect for you? I guess referring back to your book.
Yeah.
What was the specific year, I guess, if you had to pick kind of a favorite chapter? I guess which year was the most controversial in your mind?
Yeah, so everyone, when they see the title of the book, they assume that I'm just going through and taking the years that there was a split national championship and saying, okay, 91 Miami, Washington, 97 Nebraska, Michigan, and this is what should have happened. They should have played or whatever. No, it's like every year, almost every year prior to the BCS, I think there's a level of controversy and things to be questioned. And the conclusion of each chapter is basically, I'm telling you who got screwed, who got left out, that had a resume that was comparable to somebody who was invited or had the opportunity. And then also the last thing I leave everybody with at the end of the chapter is basically, what was the lasting impact of this season? Did this propel a dynasty or end a dynasty, or what did this do to change the sport or alter the sport? So when it comes to which ones stood out, a ton of them stand out to me. I do think Penn State got screwed in 1994. They were undefeated, so was Nebraska. And as soon as I make that statement, obviously Nebraska fans or anybody else just thinks that I'm saying that they shouldn't be the national champion. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying because we had this system where we didn't have a playoff, there are years, and I'm in the process, and you'll see it on my channel at some point here soon. We're going to roll up our sleeves and do like a workshop and just go season by season. where there are seasons like 1977 where you could make a very legitimate argument that there could be 5 national champions. You got 5 11-1 teams, and the way the losses work, they're all losing to each other. And so it's like, who's the national champion? So the Colorado one is classic in 1990, if you guys are familiar. So Georgia Tech is one national champion. They tied a game. They were undefeated. They tied a game. They're playing number 15 Nebraska in the Citrus Bowl. That's their national championship game. Meanwhile, Colorado is playing Notre Dame. Colorado that season had 1 loss, 1 tie, and they also had a 5th down. If you guys have run across this scenario,
I know about that. Yeah.
They're in Missouri. The officials mismarked the yardstick.
They're like inside the 5 at this point too.
Yeah. And the thing is, it wasn't one of those deals where you can say they definitely would have lost, because it wasn't like they didn't get it on 4th down and they were given a 5th down. It was that they spiked the ball, one of those downs, thinking it was they thought it was a prior down.
They had, oh my God.
Because they didn't flip it. They didn't flip to 2nd down. So they're thinking they got another play. And so they're spiking a ball that they wouldn't have spiked. So it's not like you can say one way or the other what would have happened, but they scored on the 5th down of the game. And so they really lost 2 games in a sense. And then they get a very questionable clipping call against Notre Dame on a Rocket Ismail touchdown on a punt return with about 45 seconds left in the game that they would have lost. Believe me, they had an option quarterback. They weren't driving the ball 80 yards in 45 seconds. So you could say Colorado won a national championship and they really lost 3 games and tied once. So you get some strange ones out there. So the point of the book, another thing people ask me about, they think that I'm telling people this team is the best team, or this team would have won a game. Nebraska, Michigan, they had to split in 97. Like I'm declaring they're better or they're better. That's not the intent of the book. I'm measuring resumes and results and what's fair and what's equitable. I'm not trying to tell anybody who the best team in the country is every year.
Because hypotheticals are dumb at the end of the day. Remember the whole hypothetical game toward the end of last year? We were the culprits of that. People telling me on social media that Indiana's going to lose by 4 touchdowns if they played South Carolina, which I think is just asinine. But it's just, I don't think that's a good way to think about things, period.
This is the perfect way to outline how college football fans and sports fans process those type of situations. I did a live stream about 3 off seasons ago where we debated the 1997 season, Nebraska, Michigan, and had however many people in the chat and watched the show later. Do you think I had one Michigan fan call or in the chat say that there was any chance that they would lose that game? No. Do you think there was one Nebraska fan who said that there was any way that they would lose that game? No. That
my team's better than your team. What an argument!
I said this is what I talk about almost every day. This is the manifestation of what I talk about. That everybody's this biased. Yes, yeah.
Love it. And then I kind of have a follow-up because you mentioned like the end of a dynasty. Like what? Just coming from a UCLA kind of junkie, kind of grew up going to. I've been to the Rose Bowl over 100 times. My dad's season tickets kind of introduced me to the game. Maurice Jones-Drew, Drew Olson, Mercedes Lewis, the 05 team, my favorite team of all time. Probably won't ever change. That 98 season, how do you think that changed the course of UCLA football?
Oh, boy. Yeah, they would have played in the BCS National Championship game. I just think that everything that marked UCLA football after that, certainly leading into Jim Mora, to me, and we had a guy that would join us on a regular basis, Tony Siracusa from Last Word on College Football, UCLA grad, had strong connections within the university, in terms of how it was run, and a lot of ties to the university. And we would talk about, I couldn't believe at times how the lack of commitment to football and to winning had infested and infiltrated that program, because I just assumed if you're playing big time football and you're this huge university that you're just committed to football. You're on TV every week and you get these big TV contracts. And then I'd hear things like that players just didn't feel like shit. Like it was high school, didn't show up to shoot. Where I went to high school, players would get, kicked off the team if they didn't show up for practice, like guys skipping practice and just crazy things like that. It just went to this place where I think schools like Cal are right now, where there's just an indifference to the commitment to football. And I know Jim Mora went in there and cleaned that up temporarily to an extent. And I really don't know where to read UCLA right now, because I didn't know if this move to the Big Ten would kind of shake them out of their slumber and slap them in the face and say, unless you want your school to be embarrassed by 70,000 Wisconsin fans sitting in the stadium every week, or whoever you're playing, and going 3-9 in the Big Ten, you better get with it. I have always, it's funny to have this conversation, because UCLA's always been near the top of the list of programs that intrigue me. Like I always thought, why aren't they better? Why aren't they in Southern California?
Right in that SoCal recruiting grounds.
Oh, my goodness. And
they could be so good.
And I may upset some Indiana fans or whomever that get into uniform arguments, but I have always said UCLA has the best uniforms in the sport.
Oh, yeah.
I love their uniforms. And they play.
You won't find an argument for me.
Yeah, the gold helmets, gold pants, the powder blues with the 3 stripes on the shoulder pad. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that.
When they get on the field with USC, it's just the most beautiful game.
45 seconds, this becomes a UCLA podcast.
Well, I was asking him what was the the decade that kind of stuck out, and Mark explained that there wasn't, they're all very controversial to the point, and then gave the call out to 94. Penn State probably got the most screwed over in terms of just being the one that he called out. I'm gonna give you another question, Mark. This one's from the chat, and that kind of brings us back to Indiana, because we kind of got off course with my UCLA question. Can Cignetti / Indiana be the breakout coach / program in the 2020s that Clemson was with Dabo in the 2010s?
Wow. Yeah, look at what Clemson did. Although, to compare Clemson football to Indiana, Clemson was a top 15 to 20. I'd lean them more closer to 20 all time before Dabo.
Yeah.
They won a national championship in 81. They would consistently churn out, 8-4, 9-3 kind of teams fairly consistently. But of course, Dabo, took them off into elite status for a long, long time. The thing about Indiana is this Big Ten contract, this media contract. So, all other things being equal, and I'm not saying that they are, Indiana's making more money through the media rights than everybody outside the Big Ten. So that's an opportunity in and of itself. I think that I don't know where we stand on the status of Indiana high school football. I think that would certainly help. Not that it's ever going to be a juggernaut or anything.
Ohio's right next door. I think we can figure it out.
Okay. And Illinois, they play some decent football. You got some players over there too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's going to be tough, but man, I don't want to rule them out in any way. And then you got, there's always an argument, at least in some places, whether basketball helps or it hurts the football program. Like they push each other and help and support each other and bring that attention, which helps, or is it difficult to be great at both? And I know Indiana is not great, but obviously that's where their bread's buttered. That's where
they're trying to be.
That's what they've been, my entire lifetime. And when I was a big college basketball fan, Indiana's they're one of the top 4 or 5.
Well, I think you look at Alabama right now, and not that they had the best football season last year. You probably say it's probably their worst year in quite some time. But like in Alabama basketball was a top 10 team in the country last year. Was being picked to be in a bunch of different Final Fours. So I think as long as you're committed to both and you have the financial backing to back it up, I think it's very achievable. Is it hard? Definitely. I thought it was interesting you mentioned the TV contract, because it's funny. One of the first things that Cignetti said during his opening presser was like, well, the TV contract stuck out. It's like one of the reasons why Indiana was appealing to him. So it's like, this is somebody who has his eye not just on like what's sitting in front of him, but the entire, like, where the sport's going. And this dude's got his hand on the pulse of the sport. And kind of back to a point we were making before the power went out here. Like, he's just so intense and laser focused and just determined to win that, to your point, like, it's to people who aren't on the same wavelength, it almost seems like slightly off-putting and a little bit like cocky and confident, but it's the dude's got a standard, he just sets it, and it's like it just comes across that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's fun. And yeah, can Indiana get that accomplished? I really, boy, if 2024 is any indication, with an expanded playoff, and I'm sure we could get into a debate, and we could bring others on to a debate in regards to how legitimate that bid was. I would look at it in 2 different ways. One will be this season, and seasons to come will legitimize that season. But I also think that each season should stand on its own merit. And just because if Indiana some way would go 6-6 this year, that doesn't illegitimize last season, because they're 2 different teams and each season needs to be judged and evaluated. But
yeah, to your point, like, if Indiana goes 6-6 last year, I could care less about the legitimacy of last year. We got bigger issues at hand.
Yeah.